numbers. So we currently, DFO does actually provide this information, but in very big Excel spreadsheets that aren't really accessible to most people. Finally, the proposed 5-year review is incredibly important as it will ensure that we do not have decades, or in some cases centuries, that go by where the Fisheries Act is not improved. This will be critical as the implementation of the Act is assessed in terms of how its provisions respond to the ever-increasing impacts of climate change on our aquatic ecosystems. With that, I'll close. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fuller. Ms. Kinsey.
What me do next? Well, first of all, I agree with everything Susanna just said, and thank you very much for having me here today as well. For over 100 years, the Georgian Bay Association, GBA, has advocated on behalf of the eastern and northern shores of Georgian Bay and the North Channel of Lake Huron. We now represent around 3,000 families and reach at least 18,000 individuals. GBA supports a strong, vibrant, but sustainable aquaculture industry in Canada. Our evidence provided will prove to the committee that the open net pen freshwater aquaculture operations in Georgian Bay and the North Channel of Lake Huron, which I will refer to as open net fish farms, are not sustainable and should not be permitted, particularly in the context of the Canada-US Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement. Bill C-68 is a major positive step forward to reinstating the protections contained in the 2007 Fisheries Act for wild fisheries, the aquatic environment and fish habitat throughout Canada. Therefore, GBA is fully supportive of the contents and intent of the bill. The primary purpose of our submission is to clearly demonstrate to the committee how the open net fish farms damage the aquatic environment. GBA maintains that the open net fish farms pollute and degrade the quality of the waters and sediment by depositing fish feces, excess feed, pharmaceuticals, and chemicals used to clean the nets into the water and under the cages. This accumulates over time and turns the naturally high oxygen, low nutrient, oligotrophic water eutrophic, and consequently uninhabitable for wild fish. These operations must therefore be moved onto land into sustainable closed containment systems to protect the native fish and their habitat in the ecologically significant areas of Georgian Bay and the North Channel. Accordingly, it is evident that open net fish farms are not being properly managed and controlled. We would therefore ask the committee to recommend that the Department of Fisheries and Oceans and Environment Canada take back their lead management role of these operations, which they used to have. Examples of harm caused by open net fish farms. To date, 2 open net fish farms at La Cloche Channel and Grassy Narrows near Manitoulin Island have been closed, but continue to cause damage to the aquatic ecosystem. This satellite image was provided by the then Environment Commissioner of Ontario and shows La Cloche Channel 10 years after the open net fish farm cages were removed. The methane created by the fish manure in the sediment below the cage sites is still sufficient to melt the ice above where the cages used to be and visible from space. It's a satellite image. A third open net fish farm at Lake Woolsey, an embayment of the North Channel, operated by Mike Meeker, who has appeared before this committee in the past, has been creating annual toxic blue-green algae blooms since 2015 and should also be closed down. We understand that this farm attempted to sell contaminated fish grown at this facility, but they had to be disposed of following positive testing for toxins, a risk to public health and safety, and that's the picture there. The rest of the aquaculture industry would like to see this facility closed down too, as it is giving them a bad name and the potential health and safety issues are a threat to their reputation. So this picture was taken by Kay Hill in September 2006 and shows the aquaculture cage and the phytoplankton bloom in Lake Woolsey. Other negative environmental impacts of open net fish farms include the release of high quantities of antibiotics and other chemotherapeutants, assisting the growth of invasive species such as zebra and quagga mussels, which are a major threat to wild fish stocks and their habitat in the Great Lakes, numerous and ongoing fish escapes from torn nets caused by vandalism, shifting ice conditions and violent storms, whose frequency and ferocity now increase annually due to the climate change impacts. These cultured fish, genetically selected to be voracious eaters, then compete with native fish for food and habitat. The state of Michigan concluded that open net fish farms pose too great a risk to water quality and made no financial sense to the government. As a result, no U.S. Great Lakes state allows open net fish farms. We applaud the return of the precautionary principle within Bill C-68, but it must be applied. Why take the risk of polluting the water when fully sustainable land-based alternatives for growing trout are available to this industry? We recommend including 2 additional provisions in the bill. A, restore the environmental assessment triggers to those previously contained in Section 36 of the Act prior to 2012, and include non-point source phosphorus loads as a HAD in Section 35. Add a clause concerning Great Lakes protection to ensure continued remediation and reductions in phosphorus loading. This clause, this second clause, should therefore specify compliance with the Canada-US Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement, the Ontario Great Lakes Strategy, the Great Lakes Protection Act, the Canada-Ontario Great Lakes Agreement, and the Lake Huron Lake-wide Action and Management Plans. In closing, we hope that the evidence we provided will lead you to consider our concerns, recommending and supporting the action suggested once Bill 68 is enacted, and incorporating the 2 amendments to the Act outlined above. Thank you.